Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, leaders of the BRICS group of emerging economies meet in Johannesburg as divisions between the founding members' vision of the bloc's future appear to emerge. Also, Dakar's trying to do more to stop people risking their lives in the dangerous pursuit of illegal migration. Dozens of Senegalese nationals have recently been repatriated after their boat drifted to Cape Verde during an ill-fated attempt to sail to Europe. And we take a look at Zimbabwe's battered economy as the electorate gears up for Wednesday's polls. Opposition leader Nelson Chamisa will try to unseat President Emerson Mnangagwa, whose ZANU-PF party has been in power for 4 decades. But first, as members of the BRICS bloc of emerging economies met in South Africa for a much-anticipated summit on Tuesday, Brazilian President Inácio Lula da Silva defended a common trading currency to be used between BRIC nations. The presidents of Russia and China didn't make it to Johannesburg for the 3-day summit, but the clamour to join the bloc continues to rise. Erin Bates tells us more from Johannesburg.
Africa is open for BRICS business, and what's more, many nations on the continent want in on the BRICS bloc. Host nation South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa gave a special nod to Asian tiger or giant China during his closing remarks at the BRICS Business Summit on Tuesday afternoon. He was one of 3 member heads of state present on the podium. President Vladimir Putin of Russia speaking in a pre-recorded address. There he emphasized, amongst other things, Russian exports and donations of grain to the African continent, slating what he called illegitimate sanctions, which are putting global and indeed African food security at risk. Putin cited 11.2 billion tons of grain to Africa in 2022. Of course, that's been disrupted due to the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine. Ramaphosa giving special thanks to African countries present here. Tens of leaders and representatives from neighboring countries have an appetite to join the BRICS bloc. And of course, China is a major partner to South Africa. It's the most significant amongst African nations to have business dealings with China. Here's what one analyst had to say on that union.
South Africa and China's overall cooperation is unique, and South Africa has emerged as China's largest bilateral trading partner on the African continent. 40 nations, most of them emerging economies, including Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, United Arab Emirates, and even less developed countries have expressed their desire to join the BRICS grouping. So this BRICS summit comes at a time wherein these countries are trying to find alternative means, and the BRICS grouping provides them with that avenue.
While he wasn't on the panel on Tuesday afternoon, Chinese President Xi Jinping put his weight behind South Africa playing a more significant role, not only in regional but international diplomacy, and backing South Africa's potential joining to the UN Security Council. More to come in the coming days, and this evening there will be talks not only about membership of BRICS, but also the issue of national currencies in international transactions.
Erin Bates there for us in Johannesburg. Now, despite being in South Africa and holding a bilateral morning meeting with President Cyril Ramaphosa on Tuesday, Chinese leader Xi Jinping didn't join other BRICS leaders in Johannesburg for the business forum. However, that is not a reflection of the importance of trade ties between Beijing and Pretoria. Take a look.
Overhex is South Africa's 5th largest exporter of bottled wine, with stock available in 45 countries worldwide, especially China. The head winemaker visits the Asian giant thrice a month. He adapts packaging for the Chinese market. Year of the Tiger and Rabbit limited editions.
Chinese people love the South African wine because it's really fruit-driven, easy drinking. Tannins is like, the acidity is not as high. But now, because of the taxation, it's quite expensive, especially for the middle class.
Producers want to cut import tax so their wine is cheaper. Only 3% of the Chinese population drinks wine, but growth prospects are huge.
Very nice pinotage.
This issue is on the BRICS Agribusiness Working Group agenda. South Africans are striving for trade protocols.
The idea then is, how do we move from being a political forum to actually a formal economic forum where the businesses can actually be able to attain some bit of benefits. The priority products for South Africa when it comes to agriculture is fruit, it's wine, and it's beef. Those are the products where we see much more growth in terms of the export.
While China is the most promising market, Russia is the second largest importer in BRICS. That's why President Ramaphosa doesn't want to alienate President Putin. During the last Africa-Russia summit, he raised BRICS business.
The BRICS partners are significant investors in Africa. African countries should, as sovereign states, be able to also pursue their own independent foreign policy approaches that are not beholden to any other major global power or blocs.
This winemaker won't attend the BRICS Business Forum. He's off to Beijing, but he is quite confident that his sector's trade in the group will only grow.
Look now at some news in brief. The African Union is suspending Niger's membership over the coup that toppled democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum on July 26. The AU's also warned its members against doing anything that might legitimize the junta. The takeover sparked fears from some quarters of a power vacuum that could be exploited by extremist groups. Since the coup, at least 29 Nigerian soldiers have been killed in terror attacks. The country's most recently reported that 12 troops died in a suspected attack in Tilbury on Sunday night. Ethiopia said that it will work with Saudi Arabia to investigate the alleged killings of hundreds of Ethiopian migrants by the kingdom's border guards. Human Rights Watch has accused them of brutally mowing down migrants along the border with Yemen. Saudi Arabia's downplayed the accusations. Former Nigerian oil minister and ex-OPEC president Diezani Alison Madueke has been charged with bribery in the UK. She served in the Nigerian government under former President Goodluck Jonathan and is accused of accepting kickbacks, including cash, luxury holidays and private school fees for awarding multi-million-pound contracts. The 63-year-old was arrested in London in 2015, a few months after leaving office. Now, Senegal has repatriated dozens of nationals whose boats drifted to Cape Verde as they tried to make it to Europe. Dozens of others with whom they were travelling died at sea. Now, Dakar's trying to do more to stop people risking the dangers of illegal migration. Shirley Sitbin talks us through.
Their goal was to reach Europe, but they ended up returning to Senegal instead. These men survived the perilous crossing from a Senegalese port, originally to the Spanish Canary Islands. Their boat drifted to Cape Verde, and most of those on board died at sea.
The boat had come from the TS region with 101 passengers on board. At the time of rescue, there were 38 survivors.
The western route to Europe goes through the Canary Islands. That 1,700-kilometer-long journey isn't new, but the tougher approach from North African countries who are pushing migrants away from their borders has led many of those who want to reach Europe to turn west. Conditions in Senegal, soaring food prices, a slowdown due in part to the COVID crisis and the war in Ukraine, have forced thousands to try and reach Europe. Senegal has a new plan to help its nationals create jobs, help businesses, give financial aid, better education and trainings, while fighting human smugglers. This to reduce the number of crossings and save lives.
Zimbabweans head to the polls on Wednesday. The question of the country's ailing economy is central to many voters' concerns as opposition leader Nelson Chamisa tries to end the decades-long reign of President Emerson Mnangagwa's ZANU-PF party. Our team reports.
In Harare supermarkets, prices often fluctuate. Instant coffee can cost $12, a litre of juice $5. Prices in US currency are high due to the Zimbabwean dollar's instability. Inflation hit 175% in June. Voters have little hope.
Life is expensive this side in Harare.
After this, I think there will be so much commotion in the country and the rates will come back again and the economy will change to the west.
Average monthly revenue is $120 per capita. Over 5 million Zimbabweans have left the country seeking work. Despite promises, President Emerson Mnangagwa failed to grow the middle class. But he made new friends. Rwandan President Paul Kagame sees prospects in Zimbabwe. Mnangagwa insists he's made gains on land reform.
But this has seen my government adopting an agri-tech strategy, which has now secured Zimbabwe to be food secure.
Last year, Zimbabwe had its biggest wheat harvest, but the yield of other crops like maize was not as good. Africa's breadbasket is still importing much food. The former finance minister says the policy is wrong.
The agricultural model is not based on market forces. Our farmers don't have title deeds to their land because ZANU-PF wants to help them captive, and therefore they can't borrow from markets, and they have to depend on the state. And the state is not capable of providing adequate financing that agriculture requires.
At the Russia-Africa summit in St. Petersburg in July, President Vladimir Putin announced Zimbabwe would receive free grain. He also offered a helicopter to the country, and his gifts were warmly received.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.
The Seine is literally the center of life in Paris, flowing right through the heart of the capital.
Considered one of the most romantic rivers in the world, the Seine is overflowing with history and a great way to discover the capital.
More recently, officials have given the Seine a facelift, making the banks more accessible and improving the quality of the water.
Join us for this aquatic episode of French Connections Plus, where we dive into the wondrous waters of the River Seine.
French Connections Plus, presented by Jeannie Godula and Florence Villeminot on France 24 and France24.com.